Welcome back to the More Than Different podcast with your co-hosts, as always, Brendan and Colin McNamara. I got a quote from Eric Thomas, renowned motivational speaker, to set the tone for the pod today. Let's set the tone right out of the jump. There's no sense in waiting. So let me get right into it. That quote goes like this: knowledge gives you control over your life. Let me say that one more time for the folks who may not have heard that. Knowledge gives you control over your life.
I like that. Knowledge is power, baby. Knowledge is power. Yeah, that's a good quote. That's a good way to kick it off. I mean, this podcast is going to be based on the idea of learning and applying and how that's going to translate into direct growth and evolution throughout your life, right? How you reach this feeling of empowerment and growth. I think this will be a good topic to touch on.
Yeah, certainly is. I think learning and applying, there's so much to unpack with that. And it's frustrating when you put a lot of time into something, and if you're not applying whatever you're putting that time into and then getting a reward from it's useless. I'll give like a good example. I'm reading this book right now. This is where I got that quote from Eric Thomas's book called You Owe You. Matter of fact, I got it. I got it for you for Christmas.
Yeah.
And then I was home for spring break. C-Mac hadn't touched it. I said, you know what? Let me.
I'm on a different book. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Dude. Yeah. Attaboy. But I'm almost done with it. But prime example right here, this book.
Hardo.
I get that quote. I have a whole lot of other things I've put in my notebook from this great read. And and if I'm reading all this and writing all this stuff down, if I'm not applying it, I'm literally wasting my time. And so that quote itself, where it came from, is a great example. When you read a book, when you do something like that, it's useless if you don't apply that knowledge that you obtain into your daily life and try to use it to grow yourself, grow your lifestyle.
Yeah. So let's break that down a little bit more. So, right, the idea of learning is essentially application. Like, you are putting yourself forward to either be open to someone else's reading, someone else's lectures, something you're watching or listening to, or you're directly exploring and kind of based off your own curiosity, learning something. Now, what you learn in the first intake, right? If you don't give yourself a healthy diet of trying to retain that information, then it kind of goes to shit, right? If you spend so much time, like you've mentioned, reading one book, and if you don't directly try and retain this information, let it soak in, it's like muscle memory, right? When you're lifting weights, you need to be lifting weights consecutive days out of the week. You need to be very consistent about it. If you don't feed your muscles, then you're not going to get stronger. And it's like with, trying to learn something. If you don't continue to feed your mind on this knowledge that you're beginning to learn, right, in a sense, you're not going to be able to retain that, and it becomes a waste of time. So within learning becomes this idea of needing to retain this information, which is based solely on application in a lot of shapes and forms. And we can, I guess, dive into that a little further. But what's your take on things?
I think that there's a difference between knowledge and education. Education is sometimes that information is just passive. Like, we're all in school, we're all studying different things, and because you're doing a certain unit, when you're in it, you study it, you remember it, and then it just, if you, like you said, you stop feeding that information or reminding yourself of these things, it goes away. And knowledge is something that you obtain and you then practice and kind of put into your life. So that's something that is more permanent. I think our education, the things that we might just learn in a school setting, that isn't necessarily knowledge. I think there is a distinguishment between those two. And I just think that knowledge is one of the keys to unlocking your potential, because we discussed that a lot with what being more than difference about, maximizing who you are, elevating who you are. If you're not seeking more information, more knowledge, having some humility to say I don't have it all. There's a lot of people who know more than me, and there's a lot of knowledge to obtain and gain and advantages to take. If you don't have that humility, then you're not going to have it all figured out, and you're not going to maximize your potential.
Yeah. So let's take this from an educational standpoint. So, for example, right, we've all been in history class. We've all had to read that fat history book, right? Whether, in whatever state you're in, you're going to get some sort of education on the history of either the world or the United States. Now, at some point, you had to pick a topic within that book to write a paper on, right? But you read everything in the book, essentially, whether you spark noted it or, copied someone's homework or actually read it, right? You soaked in information somehow. But in applying yourself in writing a fluid paper on a specific topic that includes critical thinking, right? That's what makes you retain that information. Like, I could still talk about the revitalization of the city of Worcester because I wrote a history paper on it in college. Now, I took like I think 4 history classes throughout my time, but that's what I could fluidly talk about because I directly applied myself and applied my own opinions to the subject. I think what's most beneficial in an educational setting, right, when you're trying to learn something new that's getting taught directly to you, is take that, whatever you're trying to soak in, whether it's anything technical, science related, in the English language, anything of the arts, is what you learn, being able to open that up and being able to talk about that in conversation outside of the classroom, whether it's with your peers, whether you want to, have a lecture with the professor in his office, right? Just being able to learn something and then try to talk about it. That enhances your ability to retain it and, in a sense, right, make that education well worth it. Turn that knowledge to power, which, opens up a lot more flexibility and success within your life.
Yeah, I love that. Even just to go on our blog section, so much of why I do it is because you have these ideas or these different, like, knowledge comes not just from teaching or in a school setting, it comes from experience. And so a lot of what our blogs center around is from my own experience. I think experiences that people can relate to. But what is then, so why I do the blog is you get it out, you articulate it, and that in itself, like you said, having a conversation about something helps so much because it really starts to sink in. You start to find the right language as to how you talk about something. And that is what's, as I write these blogs, as if it seems like I have it all figured out, which obviously I don't. I'm learning as I'm writing it, and it's resonating with me. So I think, in similar to these podcasts too, when we're talking about these things, these are all topics and wisdom and knowledge that hopefully sinks in with us, and then we continue to apply to our life, not just like we're talking gibberish into the air.
Yeah. And, in my sense, since Brendan just called me out for not reading the book that he gave me, it's because I'm grinding out a book on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X at the moment. And, it's a classic 300 pager. But the idea that I think we've mentioned in a podcast before, where you only truly retain the information if you've read it like 3 times through, that's not necessarily true if you try to, directly apply and converse within the bounds of the information that you've learned, right? From my perspective, like my girlfriend, Katie, shout out to Katie. She's out in Greece right now. But if I'm calling her and I had just recently read, a chapter of the book, I'm going to relay what I learned to her to try and soak in the information and also talk to her about things. Right, when I speak to her about the likes of, right, the martyr of Patrice Lumumba, I talk to her about JFK and how, people talk about in his legacy how much he moved the needle on civil rights, right? From the standpoint of, he was one of the few presidents that really pushed the needle on civil rights and kind of allied with MLK. But at the same time, it turns out like he still didn't push the needle as much as he should have, right? There are a lot of blockers that, it was the perfect timing to move the needle on, civil rights acts, etc. But, there's a lot of drawback in his beginning of his first term. And then just learning a lot about, Fidel Castro meeting with Malcolm X. I'm going down a rabbit hole, but just based on the fact that I wouldn't like retain all this different type of information if I wouldn't relay that and be able to try and verbally talk it through. Because essentially, right, when you get out into the real world, if you can't talk and explain it, what you're doing, right, then in a sense, no one's going to believe you, right? No one's going to believe the work you're doing if you can't explain and talk about, anything that you're putting your mind to. So it's very powerful to talk through something, because I think your mind trains yourself to remember that, and then on top of it, add your own critical opinions to it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so important is as you're doing it, you're learning and obtaining as you go rather than learn, and hope that you obtain. I think about a lot of books as you say that. I've read a lot in the last year and a half or so, and there's plenty of books I've read. Just the action of reading I felt was edifying me and was so beneficial. But do I really remember a ton from a few of those books? No. And it's funny, a funny story. We have a drill that we do during the season, and my coach, huge guy, 6'10", shout out Curly. He stands, and you have to go around him in a certain drill. And he always says this. He goes, if you don't go around him, he goes, I'm not standing here for my health. In other words, he's there for a reason. And when you're doing something like reading, you want to have purpose to it. You're trying to obtain knowledge. You're hoping that it's going to benefit you. If you're just reading and just going through words and pages and nothing really sinks in, you're frankly wasting your time, and time is of the essence. So that raises a great point. I'm going to start doing that more myself. That's why I do, when I read a book, especially books of like self-growth or whether some stuff in business, trying to learn more for MTD, I always keep a notebook and put some noteworthy quotes on there, because writing stuff out and being able to revisit it without revisiting the whole book is beneficial too. So that's something for people to think about. But beyond just reading, I think there's just so many other examples of learn and apply. Of course, we can go down the old reliable of basketball. I think we've both had our experiences in for sports, like you practice certain move or you work on a shot hundreds of times, then you get in the game and you don't do it, and you're frustrated at yourself, and you look back, you're like, I'm not putting I'm putting all this work in, and I'm like, maybe don't have the confidence or the courage to try it in a game. I think that's another example of learning and applying.
Yeah. It's sports in general, like just the idea of learning ways to improve your own game in any sport, and being able to practice that, right? The thought of learning as in the practicing stage, right? When the lights are off, like that is your learning time, right? Learn how to turn this into muscle memory so you don't think about it, right? So you're trying to soak in, right, how your body moves, soak in, how to make a certain move, how to etc. And how to hit a certain pitch. You need to basically apply yourself and build that muscle memory. But one thing I wanted to touch on is when I was in college, we had, I think one year might have been my sophomore year, we had a mental toughness coach come and talk to us. And shout out to Coach Chris Bartley at WPI, who helped us get in contact with that person. He's Chris Bartley itself is a legend. I'm assuming WPI will probably name Harrington Auditorium will name the court Bartley Gym after.
You just wanted to start talking about Bartley because I brought up
no, but no, but that's hilarious. But essentially what I'm getting at is this mental toughness coach who was, formerly worked with the Astros during their World Series runs. Essentially, what he taught us is the idea of visualization, right? It's another form of trying to retain this information, retain specific actions so that you can directly apply it into a game. In the sense of, right, you don't need to go through a million repetitions of it as long as you sit and you visualize yourself making these moves. And at first you may not believe it, but over time, as you actually begin to, sit down, close your eyes and visualize yourself making these moves, hitting certain pitches, running a certain route, it really translates because your mind is so powerful. So training your body is one thing, but everything runs through your mind. And so if you train your mind, right, the opportunities and options are endless. So on that note, right, there are two ways to visualize. There's inside out visualization, there's outside in visualization. The idea of outside in is, for example, right, you close your eyes, you are, in your dream or your visualization stage, you're in the stands watching yourself play, right? So you are visualizing from an outside standpoint how you would look making these certain moves, right? And so you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm in the stands, I'm watching myself move. This is how it looks. And it trains your mind. You're like, look at the way I move, look at how I make this play. And then the other idea is from an inside out standpoint, right? You close your eyes and you're all of a sudden you're on the court, right? You're in your own body and now you're looking the defender down. And then you're feeling out how that motion looks, what that move looks like. And so I think that is very important and underrated in the sense visualization is in basically retaining and applying what you're learning, right? It doesn't need to be a very strenuous act of needing to rep something out a million times, which obviously helps, but at the same time, visualization is just as powerful.
I like that. Your mind makes the body. I think that's kind of what you touched on. That's a powerful concept. And additionally, you also, if you're struggling to apply something or kind of follow through, there also is times in which you have to reflect and say, what I'm learning might not be what I should be learning. So sometimes, if a great example, you're practicing a move you're just not going to do in the game, or working on shots you're not going to take. And so it's like, oh, I'm not taking in the game. It's frustrating. Well, those aren't the shots you're going to get. So you need to reassess what you should put time into learning. That goes in all different aspects beyond just something like sports. But that is also something you need to consider. It's not always the application process that faults you. It's also, what are you putting time into? What is worth learning and attaining? So that's another something worth noting. But we say, like, potential is nothing, or potential. There's a quote. I forget what it was I said a podcast ago. It was podcast. It was potential. Potential just means it was potential just means you ain't done it yet. And analogously to that, having knowledge means nothing until you utilize it. It's just up in your brain. Until you apply it and you live that knowledge, or certain instances, conversations.
I love that. I love that. Finding
jobs or spaces in which you can showcase your knowledge and your wisdom. But
and look, I think what is a great way to do that is figuring out what you're very passionate about.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're learning something, whether it be in school, at work, outside of school, is to find a way to apply what you're learning and translate that into, apply that to your passion, right? So say, for example,
right,
in our sense, right, we have a clothing brand. It's our passion. We want to be able to spread a message out to the world and kind of just change the way the world thinks, in a sense, right? Bring more people together and emphasize the fact that everyone is different, and we want to embrace that. And everyone's a kin journey to reaching everyone's thought of what success is. So, right, in order to mesh that with, for example, studying engineering, it's like, okay, designing clothes, right? Being able to figure out, okay, in order to model a print from an engineering standpoint, I can also do that in a 2D setting for, modeling clothing. You can also begin to start 3D print in, machine, could be pendants or chains for more than different to be able to sell, like being able to expand your mindset and understand that what you learn, you can still directly apply outside of class, right? Outside of work.
Yeah,
You just need to be creative about it. And like we mentioned, your mind's so powerful. You need to be able to expand beyond the bounds of normalcy and be able to get creative. And I think from there, the opportunities and options are endless.
that's a great point. I really like that, especially the part
I'm
about
fucking full of great points today, by the way.
you've had your A stuff. You've had your A stuff.
I'm fucking
There's
around.
absolutely no denying it. Now, what I'll say, and just because I glazed you real quick and told you have your A stuff, I'm gonna call you out. I'm gonna get to the point of calling you out. But another example is
Yeah, get to it.
I've gotten really into public speaking. I did a lot of public speaking in high school. I was my grad speaker. The speech is on the More Than Different YouTube. It's worth a watch.
There we go. There he goes
Someone
again.
can go check
There he
it out.
goes again,
But
people.
I've and in a lot of Emerson, it's a communication school. We have a lot of presentations that we seem to do, different speeches. And so I'm really into public speaking. And I think with this brand, the goal is to continuously reach more people, get it out there, advocate for it. And I want to be the voice of that. And what I've been doing recently is I've been watching all like some of the greatest speeches and looking at the different idiosyncrasies of what makes a great speaker.
Like
Or
who? Give me an example.
well, one of the best speeches of all time is it was Steve Jobs. He gave a Stanford commencement speech, and he talked about several different things, one of which I've alluded to it on other pods. I think this idea of connecting the dots, everything kind of happening for a reason. And when you reflect back, you realize that things start to make sense why they happen the way they happen. That's a tangent.
So what did you get from that speech? What did you directly take out of that when you're trying to study speeches?
Well, I'm looking at just the way he speaks, how he emphasizes certain points, how you let the audience react, and you start to make it's like a performance. A speech, it's not a performance, but you have to engage with the audience. You have to read your demographic, and you have to know who you're talking to, and as a result, you deliver the message a certain way based off how people respond. There's one speech I also watched where they found something funny that wasn't intended to be funny, and as a result, he clearly extemporized from that point. But this isn't the point that I'm getting into. My point was to get a jab at you, and that jab is that one of the best speakers, they eliminate filler words, and I've really been super conscious of it because we all do it, and I've gotten way better. I used to be bad, but you still spam the like, not like too much, you know, right, right, right. So anyway,
Right is way better than
yes, but
than
it's just more pretentious. It's the same idea.
it's trying to get the crowd involved. I'm trying to get everybody to agree
No,
with
but
me,
you
right?
want to know? Hey, you want to know something that I've learned from these speeches is they create they have no problem giving a few seconds of silence. Nothing. Let the audience just let it sink in. Then you return. So anyway, you're a great speaker. There's no denying
I've
that.
gotten that feedback before too.
But
So
I'm just giving that feedback, and it all pertains to this
yeah,
topic.
no, just keep flaming me, dude. It's
I'm
fine.
not flaming you. I'm not flaming you. It's something that I go to a communication school, so I damn well better be aware of these things. And that's one of the things we
Yeah.
talked about in class. Our professor, we had a improv speech the other day, so no one could plan for it. You weren't as prepared, and he kept track of all the filler words people's used. And not to toot my horn, I only used two. We
How
had
long was the speech?
3 minutes.
What was it about?
You had to talk about anything. I talked about the idea of action creates motivation.
Oh, like
Yeah,
you could create
anything.
your own topic?
Yeah, he said
I
talk.
thought, oh, I feel like that still lets you prepare for it though.
Yeah, but how you're going to present it, and the point
That's
of it
fair.
was to be
He gave you a
confident.
day.
No, we showed up to class and he said we're doing a speech. No one had any
Okay.
idea.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
So anyway, there were a couple 20 balls in there, some for people to be aware of. And when you think about it, you practice it, and you become aware, and then you just apply it to your life. You sound better.
No, no, yeah. Hey, I'm growing in the middle
Are
of the podcast. You know what I mean?
exactly. The pod
The
is
pod is its own farm
its
system.
own it's its own training camp. Yeah,
It's its own training camp.
it's a
So
real
everyone's listening is watching me grow right along with themselves. So
yeah, it's a good program. It's a really good program.
but one thing I wanted to touch on before we kind of duck out is the idea of application comes in a lot of different forms. And I think you touched on it, right? Obviously, the idea of figuring out how to retain information, that's right. Physical application, that could be right. Verbal communication, trying to just essentially repeat kind of what you learned in your own words. I think there actually is um, being able, like that's why you get a lot of assignments in school saying answer this in your own words. It forces you to think things through
Yeah,
and actually like when you apply your own specific opinion or your own specific verbiage to something that you're learning that you may not understand that well, right? That locks into your mind the exact way you think about it, but it puts it on a paper. So it forces your mind to not forget it because you're like, okay, I have it in my mind. The hardest thing is having something in your mind that you understand, but you can't put it to
can't
words.
articulate.
So
Yeah,
at that point, it's like, how valuable is that then? You know what I mean? You know, outside of obviously some technical aspects where you can apply it, but you can't speak on it. But nevertheless, I die. I digress here. Application can be action via, direct physical application. Communication can also be visualization and then reflection, like you've mentioned. And I think what's great about reflection is that, especially if you're trying to learn, and we always go back to the sense of being able to learn from somebody who's directly doing it, right? Not outside of the academia, in the sense of, all right, if you're trying to be a musician, you're trying to be an artist and you're in the studio with somebody, or you're trying to learn a new art and you're watching them see how they work, or right, for me was I recently took a Muay Thai and then I took a jujitsu class, right? So for 2 hours, I was just with all the beginners, just learning new techniques, just learning the fundamentals of things. Um, and what, what, you know, kind of sat with me was one of the teachers was at the end, he goes, somebody in the class had just won like a world championship. He's a monster, but he was telling people, goes, hey, you know, we only have an hour of practice here. And some of the time we're actually going to be live, actually training against one another. But at the same time, the rest of it's just going to be learning more tricks of the trade, more fundamentals. And if you only show up to these classes, you're not going to grow and improve as much as you should, because we only have an hour, and you do half the time because you're working with a partner normally. So they have to do the drills half the time, and then you're doing the drills half the time. So essentially you split the hour in half, you have half an hour of work. And so he was like, what you do is after the session, you should sit down and you should just think through the whole workout. What happened? What were all of the drills that we worked on, and sit there and write it down. So what I actually did is afterwards I sat in the locker room and I just wrote down every single I don't even know how to call it, but defense tactic or attack combination that I was taught, and it actually has helped me retain it. Because I've taken one like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class before, and within a week I forgot everything I learned.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
writing it down right after it happens, I'm telling you, it improves your retention ability like tenfold. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, writing and speaking it. I'm gonna go on one final, might be a stretch, but this is gonna help me for my exam. And it's a fascinating thing that I just learned. But on the topic of learning and applying, because I did poorly on my last exam. If people listen to the podcast a while ago, I think it was the preparation one. I talked about how much I prepared and how I think I did great. Let's just feedback. No, did bad. Preparation has to change. So on site, I'm gonna retain this because I'm gonna
Go
talk
ahead.
it out.
Go ahead. Go crazy.
So a couple things. So we mentioned the mind makes the body, and what we know, our knowledge is what triggers our actions. How we, from experience, that gives us, that's our learning, and that's how we then apply or react to certain things. And so that is what triggers our action. So based on our knowledge, that is just to round this back to what the whole topic's about, our knowledge and our wisdom and our experience, how important that is to tie into our actions. And so I'm in a psychology class called Brain and Behavior. It's hard, really fucking hard. But there's this pretty fascinating concept that I just was learning yesterday. I was reading through the textbook, and it's gonna be a bit of a stretch, but it ties back to the pod. Is when we're so emotional behavior in our brain, how it all intertwines. It's fascinating. And there's this theory, it's called the James Lang theory. He's a renowned psychologist. And typically we think that typically we have this idea that when we feel an emotion, it's you experience something. So say I walk into a class and someone tells me you have to speak. People say, oh, you feel fear, and then your actions are dictated by the fear. So the James Lang theory contrasts this. It is that basically our perception of the body's actions is what contributes to the emotion we experience. So how I respond to something, if I am called, it's the final play of the game, and I get the call to they run the play for me, and my body says I'm ready for it. So like my response to that situation, which my number gets called, is just kind of like pep in my step, confidence, conviction, like ready for it. My emotion that I then experience will be excitement, maybe a little bit of angst, but rather than if it's my response is like hesitancy, nervousness, that's going to trigger fear. So I say that within our knowledge is there's so much power, like we said, and our knowledge creates confidence. It creates preparation. You're then prepared for certain situations because you know how to handle things. And that's going to then make your body, it's going to create your actions. And your actions are what create your emotion. Okay. That's how we round this out. And it's a bit of a stretch. And maybe I didn't articulate that well because I'm learning it as I was speaking it. But it's a fascinating idea, and it just shows how everything's intertwined. And when we know something, we can have a certain level of trust in ourselves. And yeah, so sorry for a bit of a stretch, bit of a tangent, but that helped
No,
me.
that's great. It's great that he, I mean, just kind of, yeah, and we'll have to touch base in another week, and I'll ask you a question about it and see if you actually remember it. But I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, because the mind, body, the soul. I mean, that's what everyone says: mind, body, soul. Right? In yoga, I just took a yoga class too, so I'm going everywhere here. But like mind, body, soul. Right? You want your body to work in unison with your mind, to work in unison, um, I guess, with your soul and just your subconscious mind.
Yeah, they all
And
work together, right?
yeah, they all work together. And if you can master that, right, the control of your mind and body, then you become in a different space of power. right, within yourself. You can control yourself, right? And then you also obviously don't need to worry about others because you have complete control over yourself when you have the idea of mastering your mind and body. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, we touched on a ton of stuff today.
Ton of
I think
stuff.
I think we could keep going, but I think we might be running
Yeah,
around
I
in
think
circles. I might start spamming the like and and right
nah,
buttons. So
you brought your A stuff, like we said. Suppose we'll leave with one final thought to leave people with is you hear it a lot when you lose, when you fail, you go through something hard, you're down. People say, "Oh, I fell, I lost, I'm down." Rather than getting right back up, which people always say, is take a moment to stay down for a sec, because mistakes and challenges, obstacles, they're all opportunities to learn. These are all chances to learn. And if you rush to get back up and you don't realize what maybe went wrong and put you in that position, you might miss that learning opportunity. And I think when you go through something hard, stay down for a moment, take a second, figure out what went wrong, make mental notes about how you can avoid making some of these mistakes and how you'll be better prepared to handle certain things going forward. And then you then make those adjustments and you apply them. Then that's something that we all can do. And we don't need to just get right back up. Be willing to stay down for a moment, learn,
reflect, baby.
reflect, and apply.
That's
So
I love that.
hopefully there's a lot people can take from that. Like we said, as we spoke all that out, I learned a lot from what you said, and thoughts came in my mind from just hearing certain things. So this helped me as well, and I hope it helps others. Final thing, CMAC rocking a sweet new tee. It's going to be more to hear about this. It is coming to both stores and to our website. We are entering the store. There was a post about it about a week and a half ago. If people didn't see it, we are going. We're CMAC. Give them a little details since you.
Yep. Yep. In spring 2023, around April, mid-April, we'll be in our first ever retail store at the Point Clothing Lounge.
Oh two
One
one oh what is it? 02127, right? That's it.
02127 in South Boston at 135 Emerson Street, right off of I think East Broadway.
Yeah.
East Broadway. And yeah, we're super excited about it.
Yeah, it's a
We got a
great
shirt coming
spot.
out. We're thinking we might have a hat coming out following that. But this shirt, I mean, it's real comfy. Damn, we pulled up with this new design. I think it's crispy clean, gets the point across, more than different, has a logo in the center, established in 2019. I think down the line we're gonna start getting into more elaborate designs, but I think this just is simplicity at its finest, gets the point across, and brings
Yeah.
one different to the forefront of the retail world.
Yeah. You can wear it out. You can wear it.
You can wear it out. You can wear it to a
Summer shirt.
workout.
Yeah,
You
it's a
can wear it in the
sweet shirt.
summer. You can wear it to bed, whatever you want. It's the perfect shirt for any scenario, any situation. It's nice sand color, tan color.
Yeah, kind of like an off-white.
Kind of like an off-white. It's a perfect way to put it. So it goes with a lot of different color schemes that you want to rock, right? If you want to go in dark khaki pants, you can wear, navy blue,
Hey,
you can
you don't
wear
get
black. This goes with really anything. You can wear sweatpants with it, khakis, jeans. Try your hand at trying to make this not match your fit. You're gonna have a hard time doing it. So
well done.
definitely pop down to the store at the Point Clothing Lounge in South Boston for all our Southie listeners, and then
And we're not
this will
in
all
there
this
yet. We're not in there yet.
not
Coming
in there yet. We're
hopefully
not
in
in
the
there
next
yet, but definitely
Q2.
show some love down there to our guy Brennan Carter, who just opened that up.
Yeah, sweet
They're
store.
making a killing. They're making a killing. So outside of More Than Different, which I'm biased, I think it's probably gonna be the best item they're gonna have in stores. Obviously, have a lot of great other stuff in there, but nevertheless, this will also be out at mtdlifestyle.com. Stay tuned for any updates there, but shop MTD and live MTD, baby. So thanks for listening, and we'll touch base with you guys next week.
Peace.